Okay, we're going.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us. We are super excited to have everybody here to kick off our 2022 Lake Protectors training. This is the 20th anniversary of the program, and it's a great testament to all the many volunteers and people like yourself who've participated, for some of you for decades, and the former staff that helped did this. So I'm happy to be here with you this morning. We're going to do this in two parts. Part one, we're going to talk about the aquatic invasive species identification. We'll take a little break, and then in part two, we'll come back and we'll do the survey methods. So my name is Brian Green. I am the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program. Here is my email on the screen. So if you have any questions, I coordinate the program. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to reach out to me. But we also have another person on the APIP team here, and I'll let Sean introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Sean Kittle. I'm the communications coordinator for the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program, and it's my 6th or 7th week on the job. I'm pretty new, so this is my first time hosting a Zoom event. I'm pretty excited to be here and to watch it all.
Awesome. So Sean will help out with some of the comments, and he's overseeing the recording and the different things, and he'll put some links in the chat box while we're working. So I appreciate Sean helping out on this. So maybe get everybody started using the chat. You can say, you can say, who you are, where you're coming in from, or maybe what lake you're thinking about surveying this summer. So feel free to write in a message. Great. Well, it's great to see everybody from all across the park. And hopefully you can hear me well. We're zooming in today from all sorts of different places. So that's great to see so many places from so many people. Okay. Today, so in the part one, we are going to go over how to identify aquatic invasive species and how they impact in the park. And then we'll also talk about the different animals and talk about spread prevention here. So the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program is one of the 8 PRISMs, Partners in Regional Invasive Species Management. So here's a map showing the state broken apart. So we are the Adirondack Park in north going to Canada. And our goals is to work collaboratively with all our towns, communities, nonprofits, and agencies to help reduce the negative impacts of invasive species. And we do both terrestrial and aquatic invasive species. So I have a terrestrial counterpart if you have any terrestrial invasive species issues. We also do a lot of education and outreach. So it's just a very quick overview of what does invasive means. So an invasive species is a non-native species that causes ecological, economic, or human harm. And these are species that have been moved from outside of their native range into a new location. And there's kind of a gradient. There are lots of species that get moved around. And so we have some things like nuisance species like dandelions, example, but they're a nuisance, but they don't rise to the level where they're like really invasive, like zebra mussels and cause lots of harm in areas. So it's kind of like this context. We're hearing some people say that the audio is not working well. Sean, how's my audio for your hearing?
It sounds good to me. I'm wearing
Okay.
headphones. I can hear it really well.
Okay. Okay, so I'm here's fine. Yeah, hopefully it's working fine on your end. I just got a message from somebody saying it's not good here, but we'll continue on. Sometimes if you turn off your video, it can kind of help with your bandwidth for different things. But thanks. Okay, people are chiming in saying they can hear me well. Okay. Yes, so we have this gradient of non-native to non-native to nuisance to an invasive species. And what makes some non-native species invasive? Well, sometimes when they move over, they will come over and they'll lack their native predators or parasites to help keep them in control. Many of them produce lots of seeds or offspring, so they're very, very productive. They can also reproduce by multiple means, by like flowering or fragments or runners. Many of them are good generalists and they can really strongly compete and monopolize resources. So they are a really strong competitors when they come into our native environments. And aquatic invasive species can have lots of ecological impacts. So they can reduce native biodiversity. They can disrupt our food webs by changing the amount of resources, and that can indirectly affect other species. They can change some of the water quality things like decreasing light or oxygen, or making the water actually become warmer. Some of the species can lead to eutrophication or increased nutrients in a water body. And some of these are a pathway for spreading pathogens and viruses around there. So they can have some pretty strong ecological impacts, but they also can have strong economic impacts. In the United States, estimated over $137 billion annually. In the Adirondack Park, we did a study back in 2013 that showed that just for 8 single species, the economic impact was around $50 million a year, and the one-time property value loss was estimated between $400 and $800 million. So it affects all sorts of things like reduced productivity, so sometimes like less fisheries, impaired recreation, it can impact tourism. There's been research shown that lakes that are invaded with invasive plants can lower the property values. All sorts of human impacts like cyanobacteria, drinking water quality, and just trying to do general maintenance and control of water. So strong economic impacts also. So that's kind of a very quick overview of invasive species. And now we're going to go in and talk about species identification. And in 2022, the APIP lake protectors in our program, we are focusing on 8 plants and 8 animals. This is actually an increase from last year. Last year we did 14. So we added starry stonewort and round goby to the list because they are important ones that are not yet in our region, but we are concerned about them and want people to keep their eyes out because they are nearby us, and we want to train everybody on how to identify them. So we're going to go through the plants first. Plants are the ones that are easiest to see because they are they're not mobile. They generally stay put, and they're what are our most reported invasive species for us. So it's important to talk about plant types when we are out and doing the monitoring. So there are general types of plants. So emergent plants, which means a plant that is growing and emerging through the waters, like cattail. Floating plants, like a pond lily, where it's rooted in the bottom, but its leaves are up on the surface. Then there are submergent plants, which are submerged below the water. So they're rooted in the ground and then they They grow in the water column. And then there's algae, which is not a true plant. They are small, generally free-floating, non-rooted organisms, small plants. So these are our general categories of plant types. And you'll hear me talk a lot about plant terminology and describing a lot of like the leaves and how the leaves look and what their placement is. This is not something that we expect you to remember, every single one of these terms, but they are helpful keys in trying to learn. I see one of the common things we talk about is arrangement on the stem. So are the leaves being like alternate, where they're alternating on either side of the stem, being opposite, where they're right apart from each other, or being in whorls, where you're having 3 to 6 leaves in a whorls. The other thing that we talk a lot about is the edges of a leaf, showing that the margins, like are the margins toothed or smooth? Many of our invasive species have toothed margins. So that's another key characteristic of it. I see, let's see, getting a message. Somebody put a little message in here about, does the increasing use of bubblers have a negative role in invasive species control? I'm not sure. I've never heard that question before. So Jennifer, I'll have to follow up with you a little bit later so I can get some kind of more information to try to see what you're asking about. But yes, you can put questions into the chat and I'll try to answer them, or Sean can answer them as we're going along. Okay. And so the main thing is, trying to identify these plants is a lifetime thing. It's like being a birder, and learning about being able to hear or see birds. And so the key thing is that we're trying to give you information about key images and key search features. So when you're paddling around or on a boat and you see something in the water, it kind of like sets off like an alarm bell. So here's kind of an example, right? Right in the chat, I'm going to show you something that you've probably never seen before in real life, but I bet you can identify. So write in the chat if you know what this is. There you go. It's a witch. Good job, Hannah. So, you've never seen a witch in real life, but the key characteristics. It's on a broomstick. It has like a pointed hat, and so okay, this is a witch. All right, here's another figure that you haven't seen before. Write in if you can know what it is. All right, Liz is the winner with a unicorn. That's right. We see a horse. It's got a horn coming out of its head. That's a unicorn. We've never seen a unicorn in real life, but we know what the key features in search images is. So if you see this outline, you're able to identify it. Well, this is the same thing we want you to be doing for these plants. We're going to be talking about a couple key features and their natural history. And so then when you are out on a lake and you're kind of going around, you'll kind of see this little feature and it'll set off kind of like an alarm bell, like, okay, I need to look closer at this and see if I can figure out what it is. The first species is Eurasian water milfoil. This is our most common invasive species in the Adirondack parks. It can grow super dense, submergent plant growing from the bottom all the way up to the surface, growing up to 1 centimeter a day. It primarily spreads by fragment. So little tiny pieces break off, they can float to a new area and then they land in the sediment and then they can start growing. So super, super strong growth. This is our most common invasive species across the Adirondacks. It's in over 65 lakes across the region. And this is an example of our IMAP invasives. This is the statewide database. So the data that you collect goes into this database that we are able to map and show anybody. So anybody can go to imapinvasives.org and you can see the map and you can search for certain species, or you can see, what areas, both terrestrial and aquatic. So what invasive species are around your area. So super useful, and the data that you collect goes into this. So that's why it's super important for us. Okay, so Eurasian water milfoil, the key features to identify it is that it has whorls of 4 feather-like leaves. So if you see this, it is a feather-like, so there's a central stem, a rachis, and then these individual leaflets coming off of it that looks like a feather. So Eurasian water milfoil has 4 leaves in a whorl, and the top of each leaflet looks like looks like it's been clipped, so it kind of goes flat like that. It also, the stem of it is also often like a cream or like pinkish to red color, and there's usually large space between the whorls of leaves. That's what we call internodal space on it. And it produces a flower that is above the water. So here's a photo of Eurasian water milfoil. You can see it has very soft-like leaves. And when you pull it out of the water, they just kind of like collapse like against it. They're not rigid. So this is one of our most common invasive species, Eurasian water milfoil. There is another milfoil that's called variable or variable water milfoil, broadleaf milfoil, sometimes called variable leaf water milfoil. So a lot of different common names. This one grows super, super thick and super forms a very dense, bushy growth form. It also disperses by fragmentation. This one is generally in the north and west sides of our park. And we see it most commonly and frequently over there. This is a difficult one to identify because there actually are native milfoil species in the Adirondacks, and some of them do look a little bit similar. So this one is you have to pay close attention to. The key features are it's these very bushy, dense whorls. The whorls can be anywhere from 4 to 6 leaves in a whorl. The leaf has a more cone or like tree shape there. It's not flat clipped. And the internodal space, the space between those whorls is generally very short, sometimes only, a couple millimeters. And the stem itself can be very thick and often like red or brown. It also has a flower that goes above the water, and the flower is actually the key characteristic to see because it has these toothed sepals and bracts around them. And so that's the key characteristic. If you can see it in flower, those toothed sepals are a key feature on it. So here's a picture showing that very, very dense growth, seeing that dark brown, dark red colored stem. And then here's a picture of that, the inflorescence, the flower spike that goes above the water. Okay, another species is fanwort, sometimes called kabamba. This is one that is growing in grows in our lakes. It's not too frequent here in the Adirondacks. We only have a report of it from 4 private water lakes. It probably came here from being discarded by an aquarium plant, and it can also spread by fragmentation. Like you see, there's not very much of it in the park. We actually don't even have an IMAP report of it in the park yet. The key characteristic about fanwort is that it has these leaves that are stalked. So they are opposite on the stem. So 2 leaves coming right apart from each other, and they have this forked pattern, not a feather pattern, but like a forked pattern that comes off of these stalks right off of the stems. and they have generally, people talk about them like as like a fan-like kind of look, and we rarely see them flower in our climate. So here's a picture, very good example that here's a stem, it's a stalk off the stem, and then these fork pattern, because there are native species that do also have this kind of fork-like pattern, but they don't have that stalk from the stem. So here's an example of one of these native species. There are types of hornworts like coontail or ridge hornwort, where they kind of have a forked pattern, but they don't have, here you can see that forked pattern right here, but they don't have a stalk that's coming off of them. So that's one of the key characteristic differences. Another species that people sometimes get kind of confused is bladderwort. They can kind of have people described as feathery like leaves. The key feature that they have is these inflated bladders. They are a carnivorous plant that captures zooplankton and eats them. So that's a pretty unique feature. And they're native. There are many different species of bladderwort that are native to our lakes here. And then here's another species that kind of can look similar, a native water marigold. Once again, it's not stalked from there, and it has a pretty conspicuous yellow flower that we frequently see around here. And also, like I said, we have native milfoils. So there's native milfoils like northern water milfoil and world milfoil. The native milfoil, you can see it's different from the Eurasian, where it doesn't have that flat top clipped. It generally is like stiffer. When you take it out of the water, it holds its shape a little bit better. The leaves feel a little bit rougher. And then there are other, here's another species like world milfoil. It has these whorls of leaves packed closely to the stem, so it looks kind of similar to variable leaf, but has a different flower and a different sepals and petals on it. So it's just important to remember that there are native species, that can look similar to some of our invasive species. So that's why it's good to kind of try to focus in on those key identification characteristics. And if you have a question, grab a sample and take a good photo and get in contact with me, and we can help you make sure that we're identifying it correctly. One that is very easy to identify is called water chestnut. It's generally found in slow-moving waters, and it forms these dense canopies where it can shade out the native species. This is actually an annual that grows from seed. So each year it makes a really unique seed shape. We see some of this around the Adirondacks. There's a large growth in Lake Champlain that we have in our region, and they've been working on managing for many years. And there's a few other little lakes in the region that also have it. Like I said, it has these really triangular leaves that are serrated or toothed edge. There is these nutlets that grow, and they have these large spikes on them with 4 spikes. The seeds are these, you can see, kind of generally black in color. When they go through, they look like an alien kind of things. And they also will have air bladders on them, that on the leaf that helps the plant float. So here's a picture of those here's a picture of those air bladders that you can see right here. And then there's the surface leaf. And then these underneath it, they look like roots, but those are actually subsurface leaves that they have underneath there. So this one is a pretty easy one to identify. And I see Brenda writing in that her puppy likes to chew on these seeds and nutlets. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that. They are pretty sharp and pretty, so be careful with them. If you step on one of them, that's not a good day.
Are they toxic at all, Brian, those chestnut seeds?
I've never heard that they are toxic. They are not they're not edible. These are not like a species like, you know, you think about like having chestnuts like with Asian cuisine, like a water chestnut. So unfortunately, these things you can't eat. So I wouldn't, I don't know, I don't think they are toxic, but I generally wouldn't recommend anybody to eat them. Another species that we focus on is European frogbit. This is a floating plant that escaped from cultivation in Canada and is all throughout the Great Lakes region. It can disperse by fruit and turions, which are like overwintering structures, and by fragmentation. Lots of it in Lake Champlain, St. Lawrence Seaway, Lake Ontario. We have a few places where in the interior of the Adirondack Park, it is spread through. The key feature, it has these heart-shaped leaves, kind of right here with this little rounded part on it. They're generally pretty small, usually not more than 1 to 2 inches in size. They have when they flower, they have a petal, 3 white petals. There are some other species that do have white flowers, but they generally either look different or they have more petals. And they grow, the key characteristic is that they're floating on the surface and they grow in a really dense tangle of stems that are generally not rooted to the bottom. So when you kind of like pull them up, they're kind of all like interconnected. I always find them in like these groups that are kind of like interconnected like this. There are some other native species that are floating plants. So you've probably seen like white water lily. It kind of has this slice of leaf looking out. They're much bigger than European frogbit, and their flowers have many, many more petals, and they're different shapes. Another common species is yellow pond lily, or called like spatterdock. It has these, they're kinds of more cordate heart-shaped leaf, but again, you know, orders of magnitude, you know, bigger, can be up to 10-inch in size leaves. And they have these yellow plants. And then there's another species called water shield. Water shield is can have these many different colors. So it'd be like green, have like little zigzags in them, and purplish little stems. The key part is that the stem comes directly into the center of the leaf, and it has this really slippery feel on the underwater side of it. And then there's another native species called little floating heart that does look kind of similar to a European frogbit, but it's a little bit bigger, and it has 5 petals, 5 white petals on its flowers. So you can see, hopefully you'll hear that like when plants are flowering, that's a really good time to go out and look for invasive species, because flowers and fruit on these plants are key identification characteristics. Kathy, I see Kathy put a question in. So when APIP receives a plant survey that has been done privately by a lake, how does that info get onto IMAP invasives? It depends on which organizations. Some of the organizations that are doing it now are directly uploading their information in IMAP invasives, and that's the best because they're collecting it in the field, they're putting photos and really rich data in with that directly. Sometimes we'll reach out to them to try to coordinate that, and we'll get the information, and then we'll put it on IMAP invasives ourselves. So we really use this database because it is super important for sharing this information across the state, and it allows anybody can log on and see it. So it really helps with sharing of results. So we are really big fans of the IMAP invasive program, and you know, really put a lot of data, and that's why we encourage all of our lake protectors to take those few extra steps to make sure that your observations go on to IMAP invasives.
So Brian, we should be checking with the people who have done those plant surveys, or is that something that we should just be coordinating with you through getting that information in there?
Generally, it's always best to check first with the people who collected the information. So if that was like the contractor or different things, and then yeah, either ask them if, hey, can you put this information on IMAP invasives? And then, maybe if they can't, then you could work with APIP to see if, there's a way that we could get the information from them, and then we could put it up online for it.
Yeah, I was just thinking that might be something that people might want to add to the contracts if they're doing, individual surveys for lakes and paying for that information. They might want to roll that in.
That's a great point. Yeah, a lot of our now, when we are working with like private companies or contractors, we are writing into those contracts that they have to use, they have to report any invasives to the IMAP system. And it's usually very easy for them to also do that too. So it's not a big issue. But that's a good point. That's great to point out, Kathy. Oh, another key thing about Little Floating Heart, I didn't go forward on this. It has these little, people call them like bananas, or like little plant tubers right below the surface. So that's different from European frogbit. Okay, starry stonewort. This is a new species for the lake protectors this year. So this is actually technically a macroalgae. It doesn't have true roots, true vascular system. So it's a complex algae that grows collectively together. You generally find it growing up on the bottom of the substrate, and it can form these kind of like pillowy like mats. Sometimes those mats can be like up to 7 feet long and dense. And the key feature that it has is this white star-like bubble that's an asexual reproductive part of its body right here. So you can see that's where the star comes from. So it has these long internodes and then these branches that come off of it. There are some native macroalgae like Nutella or Chara that we call muskgrass, but they don't have these star-like bubbles that you see. This is a species that is all throughout the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario. We have it as close as 5 miles away from the Adirondack Park. So we are hoping that it won't come in, but we want to train everybody to be on the lookout for it. So if you did see it, we would be able to be alerted earlier. So that is starry stonewort, a macroalgae. Next is curly leaf pondweed. This is what we call our potamogedons, our pondweeds. There's many different types of pondweeds in our lakes. They're probably one of the most common groups of species in our lake. This one has a really unique life history where it starts growing in November, December, and grows underneath the ice on our lakes in the wintertime. And then, when the ice comes off, it's already ready to start expanding. And right about now, by like late June, early July, it's already dying off and senescing. And it's making these overwintering buds or turions that will fall back down into the surface and to the substrate, and then it'll grow the next year. So this is one that if you're out surveying in August or September, you're not going to see it in your lake because it's already gone senescent. We do have it spread around the park. It's probably our third most common invasive plant species, all throughout Lake Champlain. Once again, the St. Lawrence River, and it probably is in a couple more places than we know because, like I said, that timing issue when people are looking at it. Pond weeds are all alternately spaced leaves arrangement, and they have these strong midribs. So that's the characteristic of a pond weed. The key characteristic of curly leaf pondweed is that it has a wavy, kind of like what people call like lasagna or bacon-like margin. So you'll see these wavy leaves on it. And then on the leaf, you'll see these little minute teeth or little serrations on it. And those are the key characteristics. But once again, there are other pond weeds that are native. So like our white stem pond weed over here, or like clasping leaf pond weed. These ones can have some of that kind of waviness in the leaf. The leaf is generally like longer and more like lance-like and generally thicker than the curly leaf pondweed. But the key thing is it doesn't have those serrations. I see this question in the chat: do all pond weeds die back with warm water? No, that is not true. These especially our native pond weeds, they will persist throughout the whole entire summer. So, so you will see them throughout. But once again, curly leaf pondweed generally by early July, mid-July has almost disappeared from our waterways. So good question, Deborah. All right, the last plant is hydrilla. It can grow super dense, super thick, clogging our waterways, preventing boating and other recreation for this. And this is a species that is not yet in the Adirondacks. We want to make sure that it stays away from the Adirondacks because it can have a lot of negative impacts. And one of these negative impacts is actually this amazing cascade pathway of how that was recently found out and published in the Science magazine last year, done by a team from University of Georgia and Martin Luther University in Germany. And what they found was that hydrilla was growing in these reservoirs in the southeastern United States. And the hydrilla plant became good habitat for a native cyanobacteria to grow on the surface of the leaves. And well, in the presence of a bromide, this cyanobacteria produced a neurotoxin that caused organisms that ate it to develop vascular myelopathy, which is a disease that causes brain lesions. So, ducks, coots, other birds would eat the hydrilla that had it. They would get sick and they would die. And then there was all these eagles that were eating these coots and other things like great horned owls and vultures, and then they were getting sick and dying themselves. So a crazy indirect pathway of showing like how invasive species sometimes can create conditions that make other things kind of worse for it. So we definitely don't want to have hydrilla in our water bodies. So it is in like the Finger Lakes, in the Buffalo Niagara River, in the Susquehanna, down in Long Island and Pennsylvania. So, we want to make sure that it doesn't come here. So part of that is to really try to be able to identify it. And the key characteristics for hydrilla is it has leaves and whorls of 4 to 6. And once again, it has these little serrations and has these little tiny spines on the midrib. So there are a native species that do look pretty close to it. This is one like called Elodea canadensis. It has leaves in whorls of 3, and it has smooth edges. This is one of our most common plants in New York. So you'll probably see this in the ponds and lakes that you look on. So if you see it, it's good to kind of check them to make sure, okay, like, does this have smooth leaves? If it has smooth leaves, and it's not hydrilla. Okay, so that was a pretty quick review of 8 plant species, in the manual that we sent out and is on our website. There's lots of different information and photos of these species with these key characteristics. You can go on our website and you can see photos and see different things. There's also lots of good guides, or you can use some different apps to help identify them. So hopefully hopefully, you feel like you have the resource. And once again, it's a lifetime of learning to be able to learn to identify some things. So does anybody have any questions about the plants? Okay, so if I don't hear any questions about plants, here's a question that's coming up from Sally. What can be done once a native species is identified in a lake? We'll talk a little bit about this later on, but the key thing we talk about is prevention, monitoring, and then management. And so the key part is that if a species does come in, we want to detect it early, because if we detect it early and there's a little bit of the plant, where it's much more likely that we can successfully manage it and even eradicate it if we find it early. If there's lots and lots of it when it's first reported, then we're really behind the growth curve. It can be a difficult task. And so some of these invasive species, when they come in here, once they're here, they're probably going to be in your lake for a long time. And some of the species, like the animal species, we'll talk about zebra mussel, spiny water flea. We currently don't have any technologies to remove them. Let's see, I see a couple more questions that are coming in here quickly now in the chat. Let me see if I can. One person's talking about like, oh, I use the Merlin bird ID from Cornell to ID birds. Great app if you're a birder. Is there a similar plant ID app? There are some of these that are doing well. There's different ones like the iNaturalist app that can help you. One called Seeker. I think there's another one called like Photo This. They can help with plants. They generally do better with terrestrial plants than aquatic plants because they don't have as many things. And when you take an aquatic plant out of the water, it kind of like collapses on ourselves. So it's not as easy to get a photo of it. But yeah, if you check out like iNaturalist or Seeker or Photo This, those are some good ones. We see a question about different types of management. And so one was a question about using herbicides. So there's generally physical management, like removing by like hand harvesting or putting like benthic mats down. So that's what we call like physical or mechanical removal. There's biological, like using a different species to eat it. So we have examples like with insects on like purple loosestrife. There's even some insects that do eat milfoil too. And then there's chemicals. So like using an herbicide or a pesticide to kill these. Each one of these tools has its positives and its negatives. And so as a lake manager, what I try to do is find the right tool for the right job. And that depends on a lot of different factors. And so, and sometimes what really needs to happen is what's called an integrated pest management approach, where you're using multiple tools in a lake over a time period to manage them. What if, I got another question here. What if we find a lot of Elodea and want to report it because it seems like a lot for the water body size? So this is something that we are hearing more and more of because two big things are happening in our lakes. Overall, in the North Country, our lakes are getting warmer and we're generally seeing more nutrients coming in there. And so the analogy I like to use is like with a garden. If you had a garden where you grew tomatoes and peppers or cucumbers in it, think if you put in more fertilizer and put in more sunshine on it, what would you expect to happen to that garden? You would expect those plants to grow more. Well, that same thing is happening to our lakes. They are getting warmer. We are generally having more nutrients running off to them. So both native plants and invasive plants are growing more. And so sometimes a native plant can become troublesome in some ways. And so you can use these same monitoring techniques to monitor and map them. And then you might even have to use some of the same management techniques to try to control them. Yeah, and so to remove, so another question was talking about this, hey, can we remove these invasive species, or can we remove native plants? Yes, those are something that we can do, but in almost all areas in all situations in New York, you need to have proper permits. So permits from the DEC, permits through the APA, and that depends on what species you're working with and what type of management activity is that, mechanical, biological, or chemical, that you are doing. So yeah, great questions. Generally with lake protectors, we're a little bit more focused on the beginning part of this about the identification and reporting, but then that does start us on a pathway of working with APIP, working with our different agencies to try to manage these species. And so then Jennifer's asking a question about the bubblers. So are they pulling warm water up and not allowing for lakes to freeze fully or as cold as before, and thus altering the natural protection and suppression? Okay, so you're talking about like the, yeah, so sometimes people put bubblers around their like docks to protect them from the ice and icing up on them. I've not seen any research or things that's shown that there is a direct correlation between areas that have bubblers and increased invasive species. I would think that, generally these are pretty small areas right around docks, so they're hopefully wouldn't have too big of an impact, but overall, our lakes are best served when they're in a natural state. Somebody asked, what is a bubbler? A bubbler is a machine that people put in the water, but usually around docks, that blows air, and so it keeps the surface of the water moving, and that prevents it from freezing. Okay, so all sorts of good questions, but now we got to jump into the animals, because we have 8 of these to go through, and then some other different points to talk about. But I love the questions and all these different comments we're having from everybody. Oh. Okay, the first animal species we're going to talk about is spiny water flea. This is an invasive zooplankton. This is a species that was brought over in the excuse me, in the ballast water from Eurasia. They are just about microscopic. You can see this photo, like here's 2 these are adults that are on the tip of your fingernail. I mean, they're just a couple millimeters in size. They have these long tails with these spiny little spikes on them. And the most frequent way that you will see them is that they will be on, if you're out fishing or have like a line in the water, they can goop up on that line and foul your fishing equipment. They have become huge populations in our Great Lakes and in Lake Champlain and some of our water bodies in here. And they've really can affect the zooplankton, the native zooplankton, algae populations in our water. And that can change our food webs. The native prey fish, they don't really like to eat them because they have these spiny long tails on them. Currently, they are in 9 lakes in our region: Great Sacandaga, Lake George, Piseco, Pex, Sacandaga, Lake Pleasant, Lake Champlain, Indian Lake, Stewart's Bridge. There is no tool that we have to remove them. Once they come into a lake, they are there, short of we'd have to drain all the water from the lake, and that's not possible. We really focus on containment. And that's why if you go to one of these water bodies, we need everybody to go through a decontamination station, where you go to one of our free boat wash stations in the Adirondacks and get 140-degree hot water boat wash that they flush out your engine, flush out all your live wells, wash off the boat with this high pressure hot water, because that's what kills it, because you can't see these. And if you took a boat and it had a cup of water, or even a thimbleful of water with it that had some spiny water flea or fishhook water flea in it, then they could live and get into that other place. Here's an example of just kind of talking about their impacts. We talked about they really change food webs because the small fish, prey fish that eat them don't like to eat the zooplankton. This can then cascade up into our sports fish. So they find places like walleye size are impacted by this, and that was found in the Midwest. And they also they eat other zooplankton, and they have these different impacts on like the algae, so they can help change the water clarity that is going on in these places by preferentially removing other zooplankton that eat the algae. Another one is fishhook water flea. Once again, it's very similar, very minute. It has this long kind of hook, and then these hooks on their end. This is where the hook-like structure they talk about with their arms. These ones also came through ballast water through the Great Lakes systems. It is only in Lake Champlain currently, and has now become one of the dominant zooplanktons in there. Spiny water flea came first for Lake Champlain, and then fishhook water flea, and now we've kind of seen that fishhook water flea is out competing the spiny water flea. So there's all sorts of interesting dynamics that are going on. So once again, we're trying to contain this just in Lake Champlain. Another species that is probably one of the poster childs for aquatic invasive species is zebra mussels. These are these small, minute, generally less than 1 inch long mussels. They came over in the ballast water from the Black and Caspian seas, and then they have spread throughout our Great Lakes and started to spread to other water bodies. They can grow in super dense numbers. You can see this photo of a shopping cart that fell in coating things. I was working on Lake Champlain yesterday, and just seeing them all over so many rocks and pilings and so many places. They have these byssal threads that help them kind of attach to places, and they have this kind of creamy, lighter colored with darker bands going. There's that zebra kind of like pattern. Generally small, less than 1 inch in size. And once again, these are filter feeders, so they are filtering things out from the water column, and they can change the water clarity, which you think would be like, oh, a good thing, our lakes are getting clearer. But that's actually is an unnatural thing that happens, and it can change how far sunlight can penetrate. It can warm the upper part of the water column more. It can allow aquatic plants to spread to deeper waters. They are also filtering out all sorts of bad things and putting them into their bodies, like botulism and heavy metals. And then they can grow to really nuisance problems, clogging pipes and coating boats. So we have to pay to remove them locally. Once again, they are in Lake Champlain and Lake George in the Adirondacks. We're trying to keep them in those areas, but all throughout other places, all throughout other water bodies. So we really want to keep these out. Once again, they have small juvenile that are called veligers that are microscopic. You cannot see. If you go to a lake that has these organisms on them, you need to do the decontamination steps. Kathy, are we monitoring different lakes for their chemical composition and see which lakes are at risk for zebra mussels? Yep, this is a good question. One of the things that we seem to generally see is that zebra mussels need a pretty strong calcium level in the water bodies to build their shells. So in general, we think that most of the lakes in the Adirondacks don't have that level of calcium in them, so there would be hopefully less at risk, but I don't want to find out. There's all sorts of examples where we think that a species won't be able to live in a place, and then it is able to come to it. So I don't want to do an experiment and try to move some zebra mussels around and see if they're going to actually survive. So that's why we're really, we push the containment. Another species that's very similar, and it's the next one on our list, is is the quagga mussel. And the quagga mussel is one that we think has a lower calcium requirement. And so we do think that it would be more suitable for more of our lakes. We currently don't have the quagga mussel in the Adirondack region. It looks very similar to the zebra mussel, but it is different in that it generally grows bigger. It can be from up to 2 inches in size, and it generally has a not as strong of a zebra marking pattern. And the real key characteristic to tell is a zebra mussel has like a flat bottom, so it's kind of like triangular shape. So you can set it up on something and it'll sit up, it'll sit flat and stay up. But a quagga mussel has kind of this rounded overall shape, so it'll just kind of like flop over on over there. So that's a key thing to kind of tell them apart. Quagga mussels are, once again, they are not in the Adirondacks, but they are in areas not too far away. So, we really want to be on the lookout for them. And our last mussel species that we'll talk about is Asian clam, sometimes called golden clam. It has these strong annual, these ring patterns from its growth in this bright golden color. They're generally, pretty small, about the size of your thumbnail. There are native mussels, like these really big heel splitter mussels you'll see here, and there's also native invasive and native snails through there. So this is one to be on the lookout. They're generally in the sediment of sandy places on lakes. We only have Asian clam in Lake George. So once again, this is an example of one that we just want to contain. The Asian clam can grow to really large populations. It's also like one of these filter feeders that's causing these problems. So it is one that we want to, keep out of our water bodies. The next one is Chinese mystery snail. This is a large snail that has this very kind of globular-like swirl to it, and it will has a strong, what we call very large, like a perculum or trapdoor that it can use to kind of close off when it goes inside there. They generally also tend to have a very strong smell, very stinky, and they're generally not the most pleasant species in them. So here's a picture of one in the water. These ones are probably more widespread than we have information about in the Adirondacks. So if you see this species, we really want you to report it. I believe this is probably an underreported species, but we do have it in this northern edge here of our lakes and some of our different places throughout there. Once again, they can grow to very large, have these boom and bust cycles, and that they, yes, Kathy says they kind of look, they look and smell pretty stinky on there. They can grow in these really large populations, and they eat all sorts of biofilms and are competing with other native snail species, eat native fish eggs. They can also transfer parasites to fish in our bass populations. So definitely something that we want to keep out. Rusty crayfish is another invasive species that we don't have a lot of information on. We don't have reports of it in our Adirondacks, but it is kind of a cryptic species. There are native species of crayfish, so people could confuse it with. The key characteristic, it has this rusty spot on the carapace on the back there, and it has these these claws that have these black tips on them, and that when they close their claws, there's a kind of an oval gap when it's closed. These are voracious predators that can come in, and they just can mow through all the plants and organisms and animals on everything. So they can really have big impacts on our food webs also through there. Once again, there's a couple historic reports of them in the Adirondack parks, but really not very much. But we think this is probably a cryptic species that could be in our streams or could be in our lakes and more places. So keep a lookout for it. And if you see one, you're gonna have to probably try to collect a sample for us so that we can verify it. And last but not least is round goby. This is a small bottom fish, a benthic fish, can be anywhere from 3 to 10 inches in size. This is once again another species that has moved in from the Great Lakes and has moved in from ballast water of shipping containers from overseas. There are native sculpins and darters that we have that could look a little bit similar, but the key characteristic is it has this dark spot on the top, on the dorsal fin, in that its pelvic fin under here is a single fused kind of suction cup-like fin, whereas our native fish generally have 2 separate pelvic fins on them. All throughout the Great Lakes, all throughout the St. Lawrence, it has unfortunately moved through the Erie Canal system into the Mohawk River, moved into the from the Mohawk River now into the Hudson River. And that is a concern for us because the Hudson River is connected to Lake Champlain by the Champlain Canal. So there is a pathway that it could now potentially move through the canal. From the south, they could also move into the canal, into the Lake Champlain from the north through the Richelieu River and the canal up there. So we are doing a lot of work with our partners, and we wanted to raise the awareness of people about this with saying that it's something to be on the lookout. And really, one of the main potential vectors of this is bait buckets. So people going fishing, getting bait from one lake, and then driving to another lake and using it as bait for fishing, and then maybe at the end of the day saying, oh, I don't need any more of this, and just dumping it out. We don't want anybody to dump bait into an area. Interestingly, round goby is one of the few organisms that eats zebra mussels, and you think, oh, okay, like this is like a good thing. It came from Eurasia where the zebra mussels were, so it had evolved to eat them. Oh, great, we're going to have one invasive species eat another invasive species. Well, it doesn't really eat enough of them that it really removes them. And then what that actually does is it actually causes more problems. And so because the zebra mussels and quagga mussels are filtering things out, they are getting things like heavy metals and botulism and viral hemorrhagic septicemia in them. And so then when the goby eats it, it is now upcycling those things into the food webs. And so the gobies can get sick themselves from having botulism and start to act slow or die. And then when birds eat them, like loons or mergansers, they can actually get sick and die. In the past 20 years, we've had over 80,000 birds die from avian botulism that they've gotten from eating infected fish. So once again, it's one of these these indirect pathways that, when you have these multiple invasive species in there, it's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen. And so that's why, our best thing is like, hey, we want to keep the gobies out of the Adirondack parks. We want to keep the gobies out of Lake Champlain because we don't know all the cascading effects that will happen if they get into them. Okay, so that was our 8 species of animals. And I see a question already in the chat talking about what's the latest on freshwater jellies. There are different forms of freshwater jellies, so bryophytes or like similar types of very simple organisms that live in our freshwater lakes. Some of these are native and some of these are not native. Currently, APIP they're not one of the 16 species that we have our lake protectors focus on. We haven't seen it kind of have enough impacts or be in enough area to kind of rise to that top level, but it is something that, we're, generally aware of and regionally, we kind of monitor. Each year we go through and we look at the data and the report, and we try to come up with a list of species that we feel are the most important ones that have people trained on to go out and look for. And so there are more invasive species in our region than these 16, but we feel that these are the 16 highest, most important ones that we want to train people on so that they can be aware of them. Is there a way to monitor for water fleas except for looking for them on fishing line? You can, sometimes I've heard people say like, oh, if I get some water in like a little bilge or a little different things, and you can see them, they're generally, when they get out of water and they're in small, they thrash around very violently. And so people can kind of identify them, but they're very, very hard to see. When we are working with our professional crews to monitor for them, we use a plankton net. So we put this very fine net behind a boat, and we drag it for a certain distance, and it collects the water and all the little planktonic zooplankton and algae and things in it. And then we were able to look at that up close and see for them. So yeah, very difficult to see in a water body. Also, interestingly about the some of these fish water flea, spiny water flea, is that they generally have a pattern of moving through the water column, where during the daytime they tend to move to deeper areas so that less predators or organisms can see them, and then at nighttime then they move up to the shallower waters and are feeding and eating. So you might not see them in a lake because they're down deep. Susan asked a question: when is the best time of year to do our inspections, especially while most things are flowering? We ask that all lake protectors go out at least once between July and September. Generally, that is a good time frame, depending on where you are in the park and the elevation of your lake, it can all impact the plant phenology and the timing of flowering. August, late August, early September, that's generally across the board, that's at kind of the height of plant growth and plant flowering and fruits. So, if that's generally a good time to go out when our lakes are warmest. But then again, if you're really concerned about something like curly leaf pondweed, then you need to go out a little bit earlier. All right, any other questions? Okay. Now I always think it's really important for us to talk about prevention best practices and things that we can do. And that's because the pathways of spread for these invasive species are mainly by humans. So that means that we can control this and we can be part of the solution because we are the problem. And so the main pathways of spread are by boats, bait buckets, and aquarium releases. So boats, a lot of it can come in these large cargo containers that are coming from overseas. That's what happened in the Great Lakes. They've done regulations and procedures to help reduce that now, but really in the Adirondacks, it's recreational boats, canoes, kayaks, motorboats that are going from lake to lake or stream to stream. That is the biggest pathway of spread. Bait buckets is another one. When anglers go out, they go fishing, they can collect bait in there or buy bait from a store, and then When they're done, if they dump that into a lake, that can have a negative impact. So you're not supposed to do that. Give that bait to another angler and let them use it, or take it up and dispose of it properly on the land, in a trash container or far upland, so it doesn't get there. And then the last one is an aquarium release. Sometimes people will have aquatic plants and pets in an aquarium, and they have them for a little bit, and then they said, oh, I'm not interested in having them anymore. So they will they'll dump them into a water body, and they can get loose. You'll see that little tiny goldfish that's like 3 inches long in your tank. When it gets loose, they can grow up to over a foot in size. So that's why we don't want anybody to dump aquariums into our water bodies. And the other thing that you'll see from this map is that we have people coming from all over the United States, 40 different states last year, 6 different Canadian provinces, and they are moving from lots of water bodies that have invasive species on this. So this is a threat to us. And so what we need to do is make sure we follow the clean, drain, dry principles, and this is what you'll hear. So clean, this removes moving all mud, plants, and animals from moving your boats, trailers, fishing gear, water skis, inflatables. Anything that touches the water potentially could spread invasive species. So you need to discard all debris into the upland areas or trash stations. You don't want to wash and release them back into the waters. And then, like we talked about, invertebrates are super hard to see, and they need to be removed by hot water over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's where our high pressure, our decontamination stations, really come in. So clean, get all the different plants, mud, everything off of your water body. Off of your equipment first when you leave the water body. Next is drain. So that means you have to drain all water containing compartments, in your little cockpit, kayak cockpits, the bilge, the motor, the live wells, everything needs to come out of there, because some of these species can survive in just a handful of water through it. Once again, drain out your bait buckets, all the different areas that you have on there. And once again, if you're in a lake that is known to have these small body organisms like spiny water flea, zebra mussel, quagga mussel, Asian clam, you need to go to a decontamination station to go through this. And then this is drying. So after you've taken out, just let everything dry out. Generally, that's 5 to 7 days in the summertime. And that will, prevent all the species from being able to live. And then we also have the disinfect or decontaminate. So we have some of these things like these wader wash stations with like salt solutions in there. So we have some of these along the Ausable River, so you can kind of prevent moving things on your waders, so cleaning them off. And once again, talking about going to these decontamination stations as a really important thing. So you can go to 80K Clean Boats. You can get a link to that from our website, or at the DEC. You can see places where we have boat stewards and decontamination stations. The other thing that's important to remember and say is that this is not just the right thing to do because we're helping keep our lakes and protecting them. This is actually the law. So in New York State, everybody is required to follow clean, drain, dry before they put a boat in the water. And in the Adirondacks now this year, there's even an additional step where everybody has to certify before you put a motorboat onto a water body within the Adirondack Park or within 10 miles of the park, that it needs to be certified that it's been clean, drained, and dried. The best way to do this is to go to a decontamination station. The boat stewards will give you a free hot water boat wash in 10 to 15 minutes, and then they'll give you that certificate that you have. So that's the best way to do it. Once again, talking about bait disposal, Once again, we talk about never releasing live bait from your bucket into any waterways or land. That talks about even the worms. You know, some of our worm species are non-native and invasive, so we don't want to move them out. You need to dispose of every unused bait into the trash, along with, you know, any fish carcasses or anything. And then, you know, drain your bait buckets, all the water far away on land, never into waterways. And overall, we're asking everybody to follow the leave no trace principles, you know, pack it in, pack it out. And the last thing is the talking about releasing aquariums or releasing pets. You know, don't do this. You know, these little red-eared sliders that people get, you know, can be, you know, really small when you first buy them, a couple inches across, but they can live for decades and get really large. So they are not, they're you know, generally not the best pets to recommend, but we never want to let these things out and let loose. So that's an overview of our best management practice, and I think it's good to say that you know, most of these steps are very easy. The vast majority of people boating and going on lakes are following these steps, and that's really good because people care about this and we want to protect our things. So you can be part of the solution, and it's not that hard to do. So we really appreciate that. Okay. Questions. I see in here questions about the new self-certification rule. So I explained that. You can, is this the certification required for canoes and kayaks? No, you are not required to have a certificate on your boat if it's a hand boat, a canoe, or a kayak, but you still should follow the same clean, drain, dry principles. You just don't need to have a certificate for it. Any other questions about any of the invasive animals or plant species? Once again, the online on our website and on our Lake Protectors manual has lots of different information about these species. All right. Let's take a, there's no more questions. We're going to take a 10-minute break and we're going to come back at 10:30. So this is a good chance for everybody to get a good stretch in and go refill your drink or go to the bathroom. And then we'll be back in 10 minutes at 10:30. Now we're going to talk about the first part. We talked about how to identify the species. Now we're going to talk about how to report the species and how to do the actual lake survey method. So this is kind of like the on the water portion of it. So we're going to go over the Lake Protectors kind of intro. We'll talk about the survey protocol. We'll talk about recording and reporting. There are different options and ways to do this. And then we'll talk about resources and next steps. Okay. So yep, just an overview. We're going to do the second part of it now. So Sean has started recording again. So we'll be able to save this. So if you need to go back and watch this, we'll have a video recording of it also. So what does it mean to be an APIP lake protector? Well, since 2002, we've had people all across the Adirondack parks participate and help out doing this. And, you know, it really takes a village. And the main thing is we're trying to raise the awareness and education and provide a scientific framework for the collecting of environmental information. And our volunteers and partners, they go out and they track the presence and absence of invasive aquatic plants and animals. And, you know, we have over 3,000 lakes, 8,000 ponds, over 30,000 miles of rivers and streams in the Adirondack parks. That is a lot of water bodies, and that's way more than any one person or organization could ever monitor. So fortunately, we have a lot of people who are already out recreationally paddling, fishing, boating on these waters. And so you can be part of the solution and help us by keeping an eye out. And that's what we really want to do. We want to make it a culture that everybody who loves our lakes and streams, they give back by helping out and spending a little bit of time reporting and looking for these invasive species. So why we care about people monitoring, and that's really because, you know, when one purple loosestrife, you know, this is kind of a good photo example, you know, can spread into, you know, millions of them, it's super hard and super expensive to manage it. So really, we talk about having early detection and rapid response, that if we are able to detect the species early, we're more likely to be able to manage it successfully, and hopefully be able to eradicate it. And it's also at a much lower cost. And so that, you know, really makes things a better strategy for doing it. So that's why early detection really is key. And we talk about this a lot with this invasion curve. So our most important step is preventing. We're trying to keep them out. When they come in, we need to detect them early because that's the phase where we can eradicate them. As they start to increase in area and increase in abundance, they become much more expensive and much more difficult to control. So then we go into that contain phase, like how we're talking about with like spiny water flea or zebra mussel. We're trying to just contain them in the lakes that they're already in. And then at this high end, it's just local control where we're never probably going to be able to remove them all from the Adirondacks. This would be an example of a species like Eurasian water milfoil. There's just too much of it in too many places. We probably can't eradicate it, but we can do selective control in selective places to help reduce their negative impacts. And over the 20 years of the program, we've had over 460 lakes monitored. The good news is that over 75% of these lakes are free of the 16 species that we monitor for. That does mean that over 100 of our lakes are invaded. They do tend to be the larger and more popular lakes. And so, you know, we're really concerned, and we're really appreciative of this great data set that we've built up over time. And that's because of lake protectors. You know, we couldn't do this without you. This is not something that you can do just like once, like we could just look at a lake once and then never go back to it. Each year we need to go out and monitor them for invasive species. So in 2021, we had 132 surveys from 110 different lakes. And these were made up by our volunteers, our APIP early detection team and staff, and also volunteers and people and partners just like you. So I know that many of the people on the call have done this before in the past, and we greatly appreciate your support and input. Okay, so there are 5 steps to being a lake protector. You're at the first one. This is a training. We asked everybody to attend a training because each year we update the species. Sometimes we have reporting protocols that's changed slightly. And so you're doing this. So attend this training. You can watch this again if you need to, or actually this year we're gonna go back to having in-person training. So July 9th in Wilmington, with the Ausable River Association, and August 6th in Speculator with the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District. So you can come to those trainings and you'll be able to see some of the plants hands-on. I'll be there. We'll be help teaching you about them. So that's a good opportunity to come and do that. All right, let's talk about the lake survey protocol. But actually first, I can show you after you go through the training is to sign up. And so we have an interactive web map where I think I can share my screen. Okay, and let me see if I can show you. So there's a good place to show you our Lake Protectors website. So here is our Lake Protectors website, and all the information that you need will be on here. We'll upload our training videos. Here's our past ones, links to our data sheets, links to the manual is on there. So one of the things that you will have to do is adopt a lake. So you can click on this and it'll bring up a map where you can see lakes that have been adopted by people. We've already had 44 lakes adopted. And so you can zoom in to a water body. Here I am, I'm zooming in by on Buck Pond. right here. And so you can click on it, and there's this adopt this lake link. So if you click on it and see that link, sometimes you have to resize your screen, and you will click on this thing, and then you'll be able to kind of fill out your information. So, just simple things, the date, your name, your email, all these different stuff. You go through there and fill it out, and then you sign our waiver and tell us if you're going to monitor the entire lake or not. So should be pretty straightforward to go to this website and then navigate to your lake. If you don't see your lake, sometimes we have to remove the really, really small lakes on here because of displaying property. For some reason, your lake's not on here, send me an email and we can get you signed up. So this is the Adopt the Lake website. So we'll want you to go sign up too, and you'll get the link to that in the follow-up email. And like I said, it's on the website. Okay, so let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation. And okay. All right. So after you've done training, after you've signed up, now it's time to go out and do the survey. So first, it's important to prepare your equipment. Most people are out on a boat or a motorboat or a canoe or kayak. It's good to have a map of the lake or the pond to see where you are and also to mark down. You need to have your data sheets or your device like a smartphone or tablet for the electronic recording. Generally good to have things like paper towels or Ziploc bags if you wanted to collect a sample, pens and pencils to write things down. Having your smartphone or GPS, getting a latitude and longitude is needed even for the paper forms. Having a camera like on your smartphone to take a picture or a separate camera. Polarized glasses really help. They can cut the glare and you're able to see under the water better. And then some other things like maybe a plant guide or like an aquatic rake where you can grab a sample, sometimes a net. Those are useful items to bring with you. And here's an example of our aquatic rake. These are just garden rakes that are tied together, and it's a way to collect a plant sample. But always we want to remind everybody, safety is the most important thing. So, please be safe when you're going out, take care of yourself, bring and wear a PFD, bring the 10 essentials that when you go outdoors, you should have. We want everybody to practice leave no trace. So we have as low of impact as possible. Part of leave no trace principles are the same similar things of that clean, drain, dry. And it's always generally good to have a float plan where you are telling somebody on shore where you're going to be and when you're going to be back. So if something does happen, you can, somebody knows where you are and hopefully they can sound the alarm. And as always, remember, clean, drain, dry. These are, before you put your boat into a water body, everybody needs to follow these steps. Okay, so now you're out to do the survey. So we're going to go over these things of the survey timing and, what we're going to ask people, how you do the protocol, how the visual assessments, and how the rate tosses happen. So how do you find aquatic invasive species? Well, this is a quality over quantity kind of approach. Essentially, you're kind of looking for a needle in a haystack. But it's important to remember that, you don't need to be paralyzed when you go out and you just see, oh my goodness, it looks like there's just so many plants everywhere. I don't know what I'm looking at. Remember, we're thinking about trying to find those key characteristics. And when you're going around, you're trying to see if there's any alarm bells going off, like, oh, that plant has a feather-like leaf, like maybe that could be a milfoil, or that crayfish has a kind of a strong spot on the back of it. What's that? So, you need to be observant and hopefully trust your gut. Lots of you know your lakes very intimately. You've been out on them hundreds of times. And so really what we're kind of to see is for you to say that feeling when you're like, wait, something feels different. This plant looks different. I don't remember seeing this here. And that kind of triggers you to look closer at something. Survey timing, we ask people to go out at least once a summer between July through September. You can go out more than once if you want, or you can do more than one lake. That's up to you. you see different things on different days. Plants grow differently, animals move around. So, you know, if you can go out more than once, that's good to do. Generally, if it's a good day to be out in the water, it's a good day to survey for invasive species. Generally, you know, when it's calm, you know, sunny, but not too sunny to go out. You know, if it's raining or there's lots of wind and ripples on the surface, it's kind of hard to see underwater and see the plants and animals. So you are doing what we call a zigzag meander. And so you want to cover what we call the littoral zone. So this is the shallow area of a lake. Generally, plants can only grow up to 15 to 20 feet deep. So you don't need to check, you know, 40, 50, 60 feet out. You know, many of our lakes, as they get towards the center, they get deeper. So you're just going to go around, you know, the lake, zigzagging around the, you know, the edge and just kind of slowly moving and looking for things. If there's little islands in the middle, you can go out and check around them. You know, pay extra attention at inlets and outlets to lakes, around boat launches, marinas, beaches, places where you see existing, you know, plant beds with a lot of different species. And then often downwind shores. Remember that many of these things are moved by fragments. So if the wind has a strong prevailing pattern in your lake, those downwind shores can tend to collect those invasive species. So the vast majority of you are going to be doing what we call a topside visual assessment. So you are looking for these aquatic invasive species underneath the water. Like I said, having polarized glasses on, you know, really helps. And, you know, you're just kind of going slow and being observant. You know, if you're in a motorboat and you're just boating around at 10 miles an hour, you know, you're not really going to be able to see very much. You're just kind of going slow, looking, observing our beautiful lakes, all these beautiful plants and animals that you get to see. It's usually a pretty fun experience when you get to go out and do this. The other tool that we have to help monitor is what we call a rake toss. So this is a sample collection method where you have these aquatic rakes. It's two garden rakes that are just tied together and then tied to the end of a rope. Sometimes you'll be able to see a plant, you know, 10 feet underwater, but it's like, I'm not exactly sure. I see it. It could be an invasive species, but it's hard to tell 10 feet underwater. Well, this is where an aquatic rake comes useful. You can toss a rake into the bottom of the lake, let it sit on the bottom of the lake, and then slowly drag it back, and it'll collect plants along it that you'll be able to pull up and hold in your hand and look and see. And so, you know, a standard procedure is to go out to an area where you can see or can't see plants, and then you can do 2 rake tosses per location, and that gives you a good sample, you know, of it, and you can look at the plants and hold them in your hand, which can make it easier to identify. So a rake toss is a tool, a different type of tool to identify. Okay, so you are out on your lake, you're doing a survey. I see something. I'm pretty sure this is, you know, an invasive species, Eurasian water milfoil. Now it's time to record your observations if you have an aquatic invasive species. And as always, taking photos is always a good step because it helps provides a lot of information. That saying, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's definitely true in this case. Okay, so now we're in this kind of 4th step, the record step. And there are 3 options for how you can record when you are on out on a lake. And so they are online, paper, and simple aquatic survey. I'm only going to go over online and paper today. We'll have a separate thing later on this summer for a simple aquatic survey. It's a detailed data collection method that you know, has a couple more steps to it. So if you're a high-end user or want to collect lots of information, it's good to do. But our online and paper are very simple and easy ways that people can do this on their own. And really, with these data collections, we're trying to have you answer, you're our eyes and ears out on this water. You're trying to answer these big questions of what did you see, where did you see it, and what did it look like? And all of these data forms and things are just general questions trying to get information about these 3 big questions. So if you're doing paper, you'll have 3 forms. You'll have what we call our AIS observations, our aquatic survey, and then you need to have a paper map on it to do this. Okay, so you saw something out there. You saw an AIS, you now need to use the AIS observation data sheet. You only do this if you observe an aquatic invasive species. If you go out and you paddle around the lake and you don't see any invasive species or any suspicious species, then you don't have to fill this out. You would just fill out the other forms that we're going to go through. So it's pretty straightforward. It has basic information about, you know, your name, the pond that you're on, what town or county it's in, the date that you went out. And then for each observation, you need to put down the GPS coordinates that you can get from like your smartphone or like a handheld GPS or like a boat GPS, what the species is. Did you take a photo of it? So yes or no. And then the general invasive distribution. And so we have, this is how the species looks at on the water. And these are these general categories of trace, sparse, dense, you know, large bed, linear, scattered, trying to say how you describe it and see it. And then the size of an area. So is it, you know, and they're in these bins, you know, up to 10 square feet, you know, up to 1/10 of an acre, a 1/2 an acre, or more than an acre. So we're talking about the size of this invasive plant bed that you're looking at. And then you'll see that the last column is this IMAP ID. So this is something that you would do at home. So after you had taken a photo, got a GPS coordinates, if you were doing a paper one, you could also upload this using on a computer or using the IMAP app. So it's a good thing to do, like we recommend. We're trying to get everybody to put their reports on IMAP. APIP can help you do this if you don't feel comfortable doing that. So this is your AIS observation data sheet. Hopefully it's pretty straightforward. Each observation, each location that you saw an invasive species would be a new row on there. So you can see I put down 2 different rows. Generally, we don't need you to monitor we're not telling you to monitor like every single plant stem. You know, so sometimes you'll see these are often in beds. You know, they can be, you know, anywhere from a cluster of 4 to 5 plants, you know, up to an acre in size. We don't need you to put down every single individual plant in a 1 acre bed. You're just saying, hey, we see this continuous kind of growth of plants, and here they are. Generally, if there's more than, you know, like 100 feet in between the 100 feet in between the different invasive species, then you should mark it. But if, you know, if they're within a 100-foot zone, then they could be considered the same bed depending on the type of pattern that you see. Then you have your paper map. So now you need to mark on the map the locations that you see it. So here's this example I made from Moody Pond. I put a 1 down where I saw the 1, and this corresponds to the AIS information sheet, and then you just put a number down. So now we're kind of getting a map, and you can use, you know, you can just go like to Google Maps and just like print out a map of a lake, or sometimes you'll have a paper map from like your lake association, or from, you know, like a fishing map or something that you can use. Any general map would work. Once again, remember we were talking about that invasive distribution. So we have this trace, like a single plant or a clump of plants. We have this sparse, so scattered about, but you still see open spaces in it. Dense, so you would see like a lot of plants and lots of clumps. Linear scattered is not too frequently, but this would be like if you saw something like growing along the edge of like the edge of a lake, or along the edge of a boat dock or something like that. And then like these large beds, these large monocultures. So these are the different invasive distributions. Sometimes, you know, the rake tosses you can actually convert to a % cover, but we don't actually generally record percent cover too much anymore, but it's good to think about like, okay, you know, a visual of this. So like generally 5 to 25%, that kind of is what trace is. 26 to 50%, that's kind of what sparse is. 51 to 75%, is kind of like moderate, and 76 to 100%, it's kind of like dense. So, when you're seeing this around, this is what a percent cover of like a trace, would look generally like less than 5, or like 5 to 25%. We're just talking about a number of trace individuals right here. Getting in that 26 to 50%, that kind of is getting in that sparse kind of zone. Then now we're getting into our kind of, medium, or dense zone here when you're in that 51 to 75%. And then, now we're kind of in that above 76%, you're kind of in that monoculture. So these are just kind of some examples to give you some kind of visuals, what these different places would look like. Okay, so now you've paddled all around the lake. You've marked the places where you think there's invasive species. Now you go back to the shore. Remember, we got to do clean, drain, dry for all of our equipment. And then you have to fill out your other data sheet. So that would be the paper map and the aquatic aquatic survey data sheet. So with the paper map, you just want to mark on that map the area that you surveyed. So you can highlight the part of the littoral zone, the saddle zone, and then just kind of use a marker or use a pencil to kind of shade in the area. So we kind of know, okay, this is kind of where you went to look, and we can see where the invasive plant beds are on it. And then you have your aquatic survey data sheet. This is the overall quantitative and qualitative information that you're doing about the general characteristics of the survey. So it started off, simple things like your name, a contact info like an email or a phone number. If you're part of an organization like a lake association or a volunteer group, you can put that down. Also, if you have anybody else go out with you on your survey, record their name, and then record the total number of people on your crew. We ask you to record the amount of time it took you to travel both to and from. So, you can do this in like, half-hour increments. It doesn't have to be exact, but, just put down like, okay, it took us an hour to get there, half an hour to get there, and a half hour to get back. So that's 1 hour. And then how much time you spent on the water surveying. And this is the time that you spent on the water actually looking to it. Like if you're going out and doing fishing trip for the first half of the day, and then you spend 2 hours at the end of the day looking. We're not talking about the whole time you're on the water, just that time when you're actually doing the survey. So just record the amount of time that you surveyed the water body. And then we have these two categories: AIS search for and AIS detected. So this is where you check off, these are the species that I felt confident looking for, and these are the areas and ones that that we felt we did a good job of surveying. So, Asian clams are like, they're in the sediment. You really gotta, be looking down, in the sandy areas, sometimes using a sieve. If you're just going around visually boating, you might not really be looking for them in the best way. So, you can just leave that one blank. So you just go through, check off the species that you felt like you did a good job looking for and you felt confident in. And then the next one is check off the boxes for the species that you detected. If you didn't see any, make sure you check the none box. But if you did see a species, you would then check it off in that box there. And then at the very bottom is just general comments. So the weather, any access issues, other things about the survey, so I wrote down this example, like it's a clear, calm day with clear water. These are anything that you would want me to know about, or other scientists or people, or you to remember about, looking back on that day. The other side of the data sheet is you record the date, record the water body name, record the either the town or the county. Many of our water bodies have the same name. It's like, which loon lake are you talking about? So the town or county helps us identify that. You know, and then what type is a water body? Is this a lake, a pond? Is this a river, a stream? You know, so check off that. The next is water body uses. So what is allowed in this water body? Non-motorized boats, motorized boats. Does it have a public beach? Does it have a marina? Does it have, you know, a boat launch on it? Is it a hand launch? Is it a trailer launch? So you're just checking off what's on this water body. Your general survey methods, most of us, it's just top water. You can actually go underwater and like snorkeling or scubaing to look for them, but most people don't do that. You could just look from the shoreline, but it's better to get out on the water. And then the specific survey methods, are you just doing just visual? Did you use a rake toss? There's also these things called view scopes where you can either make or buy a device where they're essentially like a kind of a plastic cone that helps you look under the water better. So just check off if you used any of those. The next question is water body survey, entire water body or a partial water body. So if you went out and you did the entire littoral zone of the lake, you would check that. Or if you only did a portion of it, especially for like our big lakes, you know, like Lake George or Long Lake, Indian Lake, you know, most people aren't gonna be able to do the whole entire lake. They're just doing a part of it, and that's fine. And different people can do different parts. So just check off entire or partial. And then the last one of the ones is a follow-up survey. Does this mean like, hey, do you think somebody else should go out? Like either you didn't do the whole entire lake or you didn't really feel like it was confident, or maybe you saw something and like, I'm not sure. But so maybe it'd be good to have somebody else go out and look at. So yes or no. And then the last one is if you saw something, did you enter it in IMAP Invasive? So you would just check the yes box or check the no box. And then down at the bottom is my email and mailing address, because you're either going to have to scan this paper form and either email it or snail mail it to us. So that's how we can get the form. Any questions about the paper forms? Let me see. I see. Let's the chat. See if there's right here. Okay, so Sean put in the links in the chat. Thanks, Sean, for the data sheets. So you can see, download them, print those right there. All right. If there is no questions about the paper one, now I'm going to talk about the online options. The online options are the exact same as the paper forms. They're asking you the same exact questions. You're recording the same information. You're just doing it in a different form. So instead of filling out the paper AIS observation data sheet, you'll use the IMAP app to do this on your phone or tablet. Instead of filling out the aquatic survey data sheet, you'll use our online survey 123 form to do it. So first I'm going to go over the IMAP Invasive app. It's really easy to use. You can download it on an Android or Apple device. It takes advantage of your GPS and your camera in your phone. And then that way you can collect the information, really high quality information, and then you can share it, and it goes instantly into the cloud, into our databases where regional experts like myself and others get alerts, and then they confirm it, and it can share this information with other people. And then you see we use that in lots of ways, where like I use that to show you where earlier those maps were from this. We use it for modeling. We use it for decisions about where we put boat stewards and different things. So it's super useful. I see Emily asking, could the paper forms be fillable so that no need to scan? I'm not 100% sure what you mean, Emily, about that. Can you come off mute and ask me?
It sounded as though you download the paper forms, print them, and then fill them out and then scan them. Is there a way to have the paper form online fillable PDF?
yes, we could make it into a PDF that way, but actually what I'm going to show you right here with this online way is the same thing. So you just can fill it out online directly on our website, and then it comes to us automatically. So if you're going to type it into a computer, I would recommend typing into this online form. Can you take a photo of the paper and send that? Yeah, I guess you could take a photo. You could take a photo of it and then email it to me, as long as I can read it, or scan it and email it, or you can mail the paper forms. So the paper forms, it's like they're good to do. They're pretty reliable. A lot of people feel comfortable with them. They do involve a couple extra steps of having to get that information. And then when we get it, we have to turn that paper into a digital copy anyway. So that's why, if you feel comfortable doing the online version, doing the IMAP app and doing the online form, it's instantaneous. You just fill out a couple clicks and hit send, and it automatically comes to us, and the data are automatically in there. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to each method. So once you go and download the IMAP app on your phone, this is what it looks like. And so if you're out in the field, I see something, now I need to add an observation. So you click this add an observation, and it pops up and it just asks you a couple questions. The first one is to take a photo using a camera. So you want to take a photo. It's really good if you can float it in water, on a white background or something, and then have something like a coin or something in the scale for it. It helps if it's a good photo and we can see the key characteristics to identify it. This photo will also be uploaded with your observation so other people can see it. It's really useful. You then can select from a list the name of the species. I just put a fake species in this example, but you can look through for, curly leaf pondweed or Eurasian water milfoil or rusty crayfish. So you put the name of it, they then send if the species is detected, or if it was not detected. These are all positive observations, so they're all detected. It'll automatically fill out the date for you, and it'll then automatically drop a pin, drop a location, getting your GPS points automatically for you. And then it has the IMAP project. We have a project. So if you sign up for IMAP, you can join our project, which is the APIP Volunteer Lake Monitoring Program. So you can just select that from the drop down. And then there is, if you're part of an organization, like your lake association, you can form and have your organization through IMAP. It doesn't have to do this. There's a box for time searched. Most of the, this is generally optional, but you can put down how long you search for it, or just leave it blank. And then once again, the same questions of size of area, it's just a drop down list of those things, up to 10 square feet, up to a quarter, a tenth of an acre, up to half an acre, more than 1 acre. And then the distribution of it. So is it, dense plants, monoculture, sparse, trace, those kind of things. And then you can write down any other comments in there, oh, this one had flowers on it, or I'm not sure about this one. Can somebody check on it? And then you hit save, and it'll save it to your phone. So the cool thing about this IMAP app is that it can work with or without a data signal. So then it saves it on your phone. And then after you're done going out on the lake, you're back home and you have Wi-Fi or you have a good data connection, you can then click on the observation and upload the selected observations, and it will automatically put it to the website and put it out to people so we can see. Any questions about the IMAP app? And if you go to imapinvasives.org, they have lots of resources, videos you can watch, kind of helps you walk through there. Yeah, Roger asks, if I'm not sure the identification of the sample, is there a way to get confirmation of the ID before I fill out the IMAP report? Yes, there's two ways to do that. One, when everybody submits a report, the report immediately goes in and is considered unconfirmed. And then it goes to regional experts like myself and others, and we look at them and confirm it. So if you're unsure, you can put it in there and then somebody will comment on it and get back to you about their either approving it, saying, yes, we do agree with that is what you think it is, or actually, no, we don't think it is. Maybe we need more information. Another way to do that is you could save the report on your phone. And then when you come back in, you could either contact me or contact another regional expert, or like say you saved that plant sample and like, oh, you could go to the boat steward right there. Like, hey, I think this is curly leaf pondweed, am I right? And they'll be able to tell you, or, I would be able to tell you. And then after we confirm it, then you can upload your observation. Okay, I see that we already answered your questions about that. All right, IMAP is great. It's really simple use. You can also use this for terrestrial plants. So if you're seeing purple loosestrife, Japanese knotweed, all sorts of Phragmites, different things, you can use it for them too. So it's really simple. It's actually kind of fun to do. So I do highly recommend it. Okay, we have the online aquatic survey data sheet. So now this is a link to a survey 123 form that you can do. It includes the exact same questions as the paper data sheet. And it also includes the map. So I am going to exit out of the PowerPoint, and I can go and show you how you access this. So let me share a different screen. Okay, so you should be able to see our lake protectors website on adkinvasives.com. So if you go to this, you'll be able to see all our different resources. You'll see these data recordings. So here's the paper data sheets. You can also see examples of those filled out. And here is our online data sheet. So if you click on this link, it will open up a thing. We're asking you, like, do you want to open it in a web browser or in the Survey 123 field app? The Survey 123 field app allows you to do this in places that you don't have, like if you want to do this out in the field. But for most people, they probably do it like back at home, or they do it, on their phone when they have a service. So you can just click open in a browser. It'll work on any web browser. And now you're just doing, the same questions, just like how you would do it on there. So, Brian Green, I'm part of APIP. Is this a professional or a volunteer or mix? So I'll say I was a professional. Put down a contact information. You'll see, like, it'll even, fill out some of your information if you've already typed it in before. So I put in my email. It'll automatically put in today's date. But if you need to change the date, you can go back and say, oh, I did this on Saturday. There's other names of people that went out in your family, like maybe my son came out and did it with me, and my daughter, you can add their names into it. So we had 3 people out on this. It took us 1 hour each way. So that's 2 hours total. We spent 3 hours out on the water looking for it. And we were out on Lower Saranac Lake, see, it's actually closest. It's an autofill out. So you gotta make sure your autofill outs are correct. Say it's close to Saranac Lake. It's a lake. It has motorized boats and non-motorized boats. It has marinas on it. There are hand launches and trailer launches on it. We did a part of the water body, and we did a top water search, and we did a visual and rake toss. I don't really feel that any follow-up surveys are needed, so I'll say no. And then now you're checking off all the species that we search for. We look for Chinese mystery snail, curly leaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, European frogbit. We didn't look for fishhook water flea because they're really hard to see. We looked for hydrilla. We didn't really look for the mussels. We didn't look for round goby or rusty crayfish. We looked for variable leaf, water chestnut, right there. And did we detect any AIS? Yes, we did detect AIS. We found Eurasian water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed on here. I did enter them into IMAP invasives. And then now here's the cool thing where you can go and you can just go to that lake. So I'll type in Saranac Lake, New York, and it'll kind of move me over here. And I can go now highlight on this map and show where we went. So we did Ampersand Bay. So I can just go around here and just click this area, and I'll just highlight the area of the lake that we monitored. And it doesn't have to be exact, you know, you're just kind of doing a rough outline. So there we go. We monitored that area right there. So we covered around 100 acres, it said. If you have any photos of the plants or general photos, you know, you can put that up there, and then you can write in any comments, partially cloudy day with good water clarity, and then you hit submit. Oopsie. And then you hit submit. And then it takes all that information and automatically puts it into our database and sends it to me. So you've already submitted your information. You don't have to do anything else for that. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation here. And I'll bring this back up here, and I see there's a couple questions in the chat, so let me see if I can answer them. Are we able to use these data sheets if we are not in your zone, or do we need to send them into a different area? Brenda, are you talking about like an area like you want to monitor, like a lake in outside of the Adirondacks? You can use the same, all these forms and everything would work anywhere in New York or the United States. So you could do them, and I can share them with different local managers, or I can connect you. Sometimes different regions of different prisms have different programs, so they might have their own program that they would like you to go through. But yeah, you could do this anywhere. IMAP works anywhere, our stuff works anywhere, the data sheets work anywhere. I see we had a professional organization, which I think APIP uses to monitor our lake last year. Could you comment on this? Yeah, I think it is good to have professionals go out to monitor. I recommend all communities and lake associations that they are yearly are participating in lake protectors and doing like a water quality program like ALAP or CSLAP monitoring, because you need to be out there every year, and you're the people that know your lakes best, and you're on these water bodies a lot. So I think that's really good to have a local group trained to do it. I recommend every 3 to 5 years of either working with a professional like myself or different local regional experts to have them come out and visit your lake and go with you. You can also hire contractors that can do that. So I think that is a good practice to do generally every 3 to 5 years. We do have an early detection team at APIP that is a professional team. We rotate them around the park, and they generally monitor 30 to 50 lakes a year. We put out a report each year that does that, and but there's so many lakes that we can't get to all of them. We try to use a prioritization of what are the highest risk lakes, what are lakes for management reasons we're trying to monitor. So we can't monitor all of them with our professional crew, and that's really where lake protectors come in. Okay. All right, so any questions about the online online data sheets? They're pretty straightforward, and kind of once you do that, a lot of people prefer them. I think we had the majority of our people last year did an electronic one. Like I said, we also had the simple aquatic survey. We'll be doing a training about that, an online training later on in the summer for people who are interested in that method. Okay, so now you've completed the record and report steps. So you, you've gone through, congratulations on completing the 5 steps. We really couldn't do this without you. And, the cool thing about this is that this is a pretty simple and easy thing to do, where you're collecting high quality data for us and being our eyes and ears out on the lakes. So, we hope that you are able to, continue to do this year after year. You can have different friends go out. You can do different lakes. You can do it more than once, because, you might see something different in August than you would see in September. So, hopefully this is a fun time to get out on your water and give back and protect our lakes. Okay, I'm just going to kind of go over a couple resources and next steps, and then we'll wrap up with if there's any questions or information. The Lake Protectors website, Sean can drop the link into there. You can also see it on the bottom of our page, or if you just go to adkinvasive.com, you can navigate directly to it. Or if you go into Google and just type in APIP Lake Protectors, it's the first thing that comes up. This has all our data sheets. It'll have this PowerPoint on it, links to videos for us doing it, links to the manual, all sorts of information and resources on there. So it is a good resource that we can use and try to put everything on there. So if you have a question, hopefully you can go through it by that. We have a full manual. The manual is actually over 100 pages long. It has step-by-step instructions going over everything. So if there's anything you felt I didn't cover, or you want to print out a paper to kind of walk through you, it has photos and examples, step-by-step, identification, keys, fact sheets, background information. It has a lot of resources in it. So if you are interested in it, please go to it. You can download it. You can print out a copy if you want, and take that out with you on there. After in the next week or so, we will follow up with an email sending you a link to all our websites, a link to the lake adoption web map, so you can go on there, find your map, fill out the information, and adopt it. We'll send you the PDFs of the data sheets, links to the IMAP app and the Survey 123 app, and our link to do the online form. And the recording of this workshop will be put online. So hopefully you will have lots of information. If you need it to borrow a rake toss, we can lend out some of these rakes. We have them to give to people. They can be a useful tool, or you can just make your own. If you got 2 old garden rakes in there, you just kind of zip tie them together and cut the handles off and tie a rope to them back. There's nothing really special about them, and it's just a way to help you grab plants and help you to identify them. And I see a question in here. Is there such things as ADK Lake Protector swag? Yeah, we do generally give out some swag to our volunteers who complete reports. So each year we try to give out a little thank you gift. If you come to any of our events, we generally have like stickers and clean drain dry towels and other different things you can get. We also have some really good posters and brochures that if you have like a local school, or you have a a library, a good place to, you know, share information, we can get you some of those to kind of put out. You can share them with your community, with your volunteer group, your lake association, because, you know, education is really a key part of the prevention step. And also we have in-person trainings this year. So we're happy to return back to these. We're having one July 9th in Wilmington with the Ausable River Association. So if you're in the area and want to come, we're going to review these steps. We're going to review the same species. We'll have hands-on samples of many of them. So you'll be able to kind of see it and, you know, get some hands-on experience looking at them and also some native species. Also August 6th in Speculator, New York with Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District. So you don't have to come to one of these, but you're more than welcome to come to them. All right. Well, we are almost at our time. I can't thank you enough for spending over 2 hours with us today. You know, it really makes a big difference that, you know, people like you are giving back, protecting the lakes, protecting, you know, our communities from invasive species. You know, the unfortunate thing is that aquatic invasive species are one of the 3 greatest threats, along with climate change and non-point source runoff to our aquatic lakes and rivers. The good news is that we can be part of the solution by being early detectors, volunteering as a lake protector, by doing clean, drain, dry. We can really make a big difference. So I greatly appreciate all of you taking time to do this and to give back to your local communities. So thank you. This is I'm happy to answer any questions now if we have it, but if you don't have any questions, you can log off and have a great rest of your summer day. So thank you so much. I see a question came in from about what time is the training on July 9th. July 9th, it starts at 9 a.m. It is in Wilmington at the town beach at Lake Everest right there. And if you go on our website, you can get a link to the events. There's a Google map to it. And we encourage everybody to register. You'll see a link to the email to register with the Ausable River Association, who's our host for this event.
I just put the link in our in the chat there to our events page.
Yep. Yeah, and you can see some other APIP events and different things that we have coming up. So you can come back to that. We'd love to have you participate in other things. Good. I'm glad to hear some people are chiming in on the chat saying that this is a good refresher. It's always good to each year to, you know, relearn some of the species, get some of the different things. You know, it seems like a lot of information all at once, you know, but usually after, you know, your first time going out there and doing it, most people feel really confident with it. And, you know, each year you can learn a couple more species and, you know, get better. Doug asked a question, does IMAP work in an area with lousy cell phone coverage? Yes, it does. It doesn't need any cell phone coverage or data connection at all. The app actually will store the GPS information and the photos and the different things on your phone until you're able to come back and at your home and have Wi-Fi or have a data connection, and then you can upload it that way.
Brian, it's Kathy Welsh. Did you, were you able to identify a new GPS system for the Lake Management Tracker Survey for us to navigate to the sites?
Yeah, so we have another program for people on this called Lake Management Tracker. So if you have a lake that is it already has an invasive species and you're monitoring. So Kathy works on Upper Chattagay Lake and does a great job with that. And so we're trying to help organizations collect data on it. And so we do a different monitoring protocol where we have set monitoring points. We found a free one that that works pretty well. It's called Gaia GPS. We're also looking into some maybe some potential paid apps for those that might work better. It's kind of everybody kind of has their own little preference of navigation or different things. The Gaia app seems to work pretty well, and it is free and is available on iPhone and Android. So that could be a good option, but we're also trying to look in for our lake protectors that do it. We might find a paid version and be able to buy it for the volunteers.
Okay, is there one that you want me to maybe try out?
I would start off with the Gaia. That's GAIA GPS, and you can just upload GPS points and waypoints to it, and then you'll be able to like see a map and click on them and click navigate to them, and it kind of like gives you a line and tells you how far you're from it. So
Okay, so we'll be able to download the map from APIP directly onto there.
Yep. Yeah, you can upload GPS points and all sorts of different maps to it. It's pretty cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, I see Kathleen saying, thanks, we appreciate the session, and we'll refer the online replay to others. So yep, we'll post copies of the PowerPoint and the videos online, so you'll be able to see them. All right, well, if there are no more questions, you can always get in contact with me through my email, or you have my phone number to give me a phone call. So thanks so much. We hope everybody has a beautiful summer and gets out and gets to go do lots of paddling and boating and fishing and swimming and all the great memories that we really enjoy up here in the Adirondacks and all across New York. We're so lucky to have over 7,800 lakes in New York and have all these beautiful places that we get to enjoy and make great memories with. So thank you for being great stewards of them, and we'll be in contact.
Brian, it's Kathy Welsh again. Can I ask an unrelated question? Let other people go. I just want to ask a question.
Sure, we'll let everybody else can kind of sign out, and Sean will stop the recording, and then we can yeah, you and I can stay on and just chat.